For those of you who have come and those of you who have stayed, thank you. I hope that we have I hope you learned something, and I hope we have a fruitful discussion afterwards. So as usual, I'll talk for about 20 minutes or so and then over to you. So last week, you'll remember, I hope, that I talked about the Electoral College, the people who vote directly for the President. And if you didn't get the handout explaining it, and that included a list of election sources that I've used that you might be interested in having a look at also, I'll give you a hard copy after because I've still got some, or you can download it from the website, from the U3A website, which is u3a.org.au. And our course coordinator, Alison, has done a terrific job in organising that. And then when you go to the website, you'll see in the top right corner, you'll see in the top right-hand corner of the website, it's not on the screen, but in the top right-hand corner you'll see course resources. Just click on there and you'll be able to get the notes, and there are some kaleidoscopes there as well. So U3A website, top right-hand corner, click on it and you'll be able to see what you need there. So now let's get to today. So you should have today's handout. Has everyone got that? And if you haven't, that'll be also on the website soon. So look, this week, I'd like to start with opinion polls because that's about all anyone talks about, really, and Trump's egregious behaviour. So with the opinion polls, they're still showing the races neck and neck in battleground states. So in other words, it's anyone's race. Now we'll have a look though at why I think we should be wary of opinion polls' predictive power. Now you'll hear about other elections that will be on the 5th of November. We'll have a look at Kamala Harris's Fox TV interview, and also we'll look at Elon Musk's contribution. Yeah, I know. Well, I debated about whether I'd include that, but yeah, it's reality, isn't it? And we mightn't always like reality, but we have to deal with it. So look, remember what we were saying about the polls last week. We talked about the polling companies that did an average of polls in battleground states, and I argued that these provided a better indication of the likely result than national polls. But I think that this New York Times headline, sums it up, doesn't it? So polling has been part of US elections for more than a century. And we don't have time to go into how polling evolved, how it worked, and its flaws. But let's have a quick look at the record of opinion polls. Back in 1948, this is the edition of the respected Chicago Tribune. The day after the election, Democratic President Harry Truman won the election. And there's Truman holding up the newspaper. The Tribune took a huge punt because all the opinion polls, without exception, all of them, predicted a Thomas Dewey win. So the polling techniques obviously would not have been as sophisticated then as they are now. But in 1980, the polls predicted a close presidential election, but Ronald Reagan beat Jimmy Carter in a landslide. In 2000, polls predicted Democrat Al Gore would win comfortably. The Washington Times certainly thought so. George W. Bush was 537 votes ahead when the Supreme Court, dominated by the Republican Party, ordered an end to counting and declared Bush the winner. I would argue George W. Bush is the only appointed President of the United States. And we know from last week, only 2 polls predicted Trump's 2016 win. None got it right in the elections for Congress in 2020, in the midterm elections. Now, there were 5 reasons for the polls' 2016 failure. First, they missed white working class voters who voted in larger numbers than expected. Second, non-educated voters weren't well represented in the polling samples, and they turned out to be pivotal in Trump's victory. Third, undecided voters who swung to Trump in the final days of the campaign weren't accounted for. The polls didn't record that last minute shift, and that's not really the pollsters' fault, obviously. And fourth, there were shy Trump voters who didn't say that they intended voting for Trump. And fifth, deliberate skewing of the results. There are many polls, some are run by the Republican Party using a different name, that create results that think will best serve its candidate. So now we're a bit clearer about the polls, and they're the only sort of indicator we've got, but I'm just saying I think it's best to be wary. Let's turn our attention to the other elections that'll be on November the 5th. So Americans vote for the President, as we know, members of the House of Representatives, and in some states the Senate, the Governor and state legislature members, as well as local officials such as education and election board members. And you might think education and election board members are fairly minor roles, but as we were saying last week, the election board in Georgia, the Trumps have the numbers, and they could delay the certification of the results in Georgia, which could delay the whole process. So the roles to be elected vary from state to state. Now, the founders divided the federal government into three branches, and Australia has the same: the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. Each has its exclusive responsibilities to ensure the separation of powers. The founders were determined each branch or individual or group would not have too much power. So remember, it's all about containing power. The legislative branch is the Congress, and that's the House of Representatives and the Senate. Congress can also refer only to the House of Representatives. The executive branch is the President and her or his administration. The President is the head of state, leader of the federal government, and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. The Vice President supports the President. So if the President's unable to serve, the Vice President takes the role. The Vice President also presides over the Senate and breaks ties in Senate votes if necessary. The Cabinet includes the Vice President, heads of executive departments and other high-ranking government officials. Cabinet members are nominated by the President and must be approved by the Senate. Unlike Australia, they don't have to be members of the legislature. The Senate has 100 members, 2 from each state, elected for a 6-year term. There are elections for about 33 Senate seats each year. For a bill to become law, it must pass the Senate and the House of Representatives. Bills can be introduced in either chamber. The Senate's other responsibilities include confirmation of federal judicial appointments, including Supreme Court justices, cabinet members, and other high-ranking officials such as ambassadors and other diplomatic positions. The Senate has the exclusive power to ratify treaties with other nations. A 2/3 vote is required for treaty approval. 67 of the 100 senators must agree. This gives the Senate significant influence over foreign policy and changed world history after the First World War, when the Senate refused to support the League of Nations. So these checks and balances have a downside as well. They can stop things happening, good things. The House of Representatives has 435 members, 435 voting members. Now, they're elected for a 2-year term. In addition, 5 members represent US overseas territories and the District of Columbia. Unlike the Senate, all House of Representative members are elected at the same time. The number of districts, what we call electorates, is determined by population, as we talked about last week. In addition to its legislative responsibilities, the House of Representatives also has the power to impeach federal officers, including the President, and to elect the President if no candidate receives a majority of votes in the Electoral College. The Supreme Court has 9 members appointed for life. They are nominated by the President and confirmed by the Senate. The system breaks down when the politics become involved. So the 3 Trump nominations sailed through the Senate because the Trump party had the numbers in the Senate. They didn't look at each justice and say, is this the most worthy, best qualified person to serve on our Supreme Court? The question was, well, there wasn't a question. These people are nominated by Trump, so we'll support them. So the court interprets laws, applies laws, and determines if the Constitution has been violated. And since the criminalisation of abortion from the 24th of June 2022 overturns past rulings. This is a bit beside the point, but I was just horrified to hear this Jacinta Price thinking that abortion should be a national issue here. This is the US disease permeating our culture, and we need to resist it. So for a president to be, or any official, a president, a Supreme Court judge or other high-ranking official to be impeached, a majority of House of Representative members must find there are grounds for impeachment. And if it finds that there are no grounds, it doesn't go any further. If it does find there are grounds, it goes to the Senate that considers the impeachment articles and acts as a court. A supermajority of 67 of the 100 senators is needed to find the officeholder guilty, and if they are removed from office. The House of Representatives, by the way, just needs a simple majority, to agree to impeachment. But the Senate needs a supermajority, 2/3. So only one Supreme Court Justice, Samuel Chase, in 1804, has been impeached, but he was acquitted by the Senate. The House has impeached 20 people, 15 federal judges, 1 senator, 1 cabinet member, and 3 presidents. Andrew Johnson in 1868, acquitted by 1 vote. Bill Clinton, 1998, acquitted. And Donald Trump, 2019 and 2021, acquitted both times. Now you've got a little bit of background about the structure of the government. We'll take a look at why Congress elections are so important. Now we've talked about the checks and balances built into the Constitution that were designed to contain the power of each of the branches of government. Now as a consequence though, it's easier to block or delay legislation than it is to enact it. If the President's party doesn't have a majority in both chambers, and even if it does, it can still come undone. Because when Obama was elected, the Democrats had both houses. Obama could have put through what he wanted if the Democrats had been with him, and some weren't. Some voted against their own party. So unless Kamala Harris wins the House of Representatives and the Senate, she'll be hamstrung, because the Republicans are acting like politicians in our system do. We have an opposition and a government, and they each vote accordingly. So the Republicans from about the 90s declared the Democrats were the enemy. We're not going to work with them. Forget it. We're not going to cooperate. Our goal is to bring down the Democrat president. And that was the attitude after Obama won in 2008. The Republicans got together and said, we'll just block him. So the founders, unfortunately, thought that the members of Congress would be adult, well-meaning, mature people who had the nation's best interests at heart. If a party does not have a majority, if a party didn't have a majority, the founders envisaged Congress members would cooperate, compromise and conciliate to pass legislation. That meant a party majority in both chambers wasn't necessary to get things done. that you would have heard the phrase of crossing the aisle, and that happened until about the 90s. So there was an egregious abuse of power earlier this year when the Republican Party, and this is an example of acting like parliamentarians and not Congress people, the Republican Party obeyed their leader, Trump, and refused to pass legislation that would have alleviated the immigration problem. But it wasn't passed because the Republicans thought it was more important to fuel an election issue than solve a problem. So party politics above the national interest. Kamala Harris mentioned that in her foray into enemy media territory, and we'll talk about that interview in a moment. Trump this week cancelled scheduled interviews with NBC in Philadelphia and CNBC, and earlier this month cancelled the interview with 60 Minutes that we talked about last week, that is a tradition for presidential candidates to participate in. Now let's have a look at an edited version of Ms Harris's 26-minute conversation, I suppose you could call it, with the Trump, that was a Freudian slip, wasn't it? With the Fox News interviewer.
My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. And like every new president that comes into office, I will bring my life experiences, my professional experiences, and fresh and new ideas. I represent a new generation of leadership. Let's all be honest about that. I have no pride in saying that this is a perfect immigration system. I've been clear, I think we all are, that it needs to be fixed. And Donald Trump, but let me just finish.
Six Democrats voted against that.
Learned about that bill and told them to kill it because he preferred to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem.
I believe the Biden-Harris administration open border policies are responsible for the death of my daughter.
That's the early days. So do you owe them an apology, is what I'm
I will
saying.
tell you that I am so sorry for her loss. I am so sorry for her loss. Sincerely. But let's talk about what is happening right now. I do not believe in decriminalizing border crossings, and I've not done that as vice president. I will not do that as president. The first bill, practically within hours of taking the oath, was a bill to fix our immigration system.
Yes, ma'am. It was called the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021.
Exactly.
It was essentially
so, but
a way to citizenship for
please
the...
finish?
Yes, ma'am.
May I finish responding, please?
But
you have to let me finish,
You
please.
had the White House and the House and the Senate,
I'm
and they
in the
didn't
middle
bring up
of
that.
responding to the point you're raising,
Okay.
and I'd like to finish.
Yes, ma'am.
We recognized from day one that to the point of this being your first question, it is a priority, because I do believe the American people are ready to turn the page on the divisiveness and the type of rhetoric that has come out of Donald Trump. People are ready to chart a new way forward.
Okay. So the interview showed Harris isn't scared to go into enemy territory and do battle, and it is enemy territory. And you can see that's what it was. As I said last week, Fox is the propaganda arm of the Republican Party in the same way that the Murdoch media here is the propaganda arm of the coalition. So second, the Fox audience, another reason why she went on, I think, was that the Fox audience would never hear criticism of Trump. In the same way that the Soviet Union's Pravda newspaper readers would never read about criticism of the Soviet leadership. It's the same thing. Now, Ms. Harris wanted to tell Republican voters she had an economic plan. So this is a way of getting her key messages out to a Republican Trump audience. So her economic plan's been endorsed by 16 Nobel laureates, Goldman Sachs and the Wall Street Journal, all who said it would strengthen the economy. They said Trump's proposals would weaken it. She said she is a Washington DC outsider, having not spent much of her career there, and that's a plus in US politics. Americans love that. Her third key message was about leadership, which to her was about lifting and not beating down. And it's about uniting people, not dividing. She said most Americans had more in common than what separates them. So let's have another quick look at that interview and look out for how skillfully she avoids the trap the interviewer sets for her.
Over the last decade, it is clear to me, and certainly the Republicans who are on stage with me, the former chief of staff to the president, Donald Trump, former defense secretaries, national security advisor, and his vice president, one, that he is unfit to serve, that he is unstable, that he is dangerous, and that people are exhausted with someone who professes to be a leader who spends full time demeaning and engaging in personal grievances and it being about him instead of the American people. People are tired of that.
That's the key. Why is he beating you in a lot of swing states? Why, if he's as bad as you say, that half of this country is now supporting this person who could be the 47th president of the United States? Why is that happening?
This is an election for president of the United States. It's not supposed to be easy.
I know, but
it's not supposed to be. It is not supposed to be a cakewalk.
So are they misguided, the 50%? Are they stupid? What
God, I would never say that about
Here it
the
is.
American people. And in fact, if you listen to Donald Trump, if you watch any of his rallies, he's the one who tends to demean and belittle and diminish the American people. He's the one who talks about an enemy within, an enemy within, talking about the American people, suggesting he would turn the American military on the American.
So, yeah. So she mentioned there that Republicans are on the stage with her at rallies. Part of her strategy is to convince anti-Trump voters to vote for her. Now, one of those Republicans on her campaign stage is Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney is an anti-abortion supporter. She is the daughter of former Vice President Dick Cheney and a former Republican Congresswoman. She failed to get Republican Party endorsement for re-election. It was Trump payback for chairing the inquiry into the 6th of January insurrection. I don't agree with her politics, but I agree with her courage in doing that, putting her country first, putting her country ahead of her own political interests. On Monday, she spoke at 3 campaign events with Harris in 3 swing states. Ms Cheney has become the Democrats' most prominent conservative surrogate and is rumoured to be in contention for a seat in a potential Harris cabinet. The strategy might be having an impact. A New York Times Siena poll found Republican voters who planned to vote for Harris increased from 5% a month ago to 9%. Contributing to that result could be Republican voters against Trump, a well-funded, well-organised organisation that's waged an advertising campaign in which Republican voters talk about putting aside their loyalties, their party loyalties, for the first time in their lives. President Biden won 6% of Republican-leaning voters in 2020. Republican voters against Trump predict Harris could win about 10% of the Republican vote. Another thing that happened this past week was an announcement by a man you're about to see. Look, we need to include this. But I'll just play this quick clip that tells you a bit about both of them. This is extraordinary. And we're talking about very powerful and influential
so many different
people.
great things. Where is he? Come on up here, Elon. He created the first major American car company in generations, and his rocket company is the only reason we can now send American astronauts into space. Yeah. Take over, Elon. Yes, take over. Take over, Elon. Yes, take over.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
As you can see, I'm not just MAGA, I'm dark MAGA.
I'm dark MAGA, an extremist MAGA, worse than Trump. So on Saturday, Elon Musk said he would give $1.5 million Australian away until election day to someone who registered to vote in Philadelphia. He plans to expand the scheme to other battleground states next week. Musk wants Trump supporters to vote. It's his way of getting them out to vote. Musk has donated $112 million Australian to Trump's campaign since July. It's illegal to pay, offer to pay, or accept payment for registration to vote or for voting. Getting the proof, though, required to prosecute would be difficult, and the Federal Electoral Commission would likely take months to prepare a prosecution that would go way after the election. And the 6-person commission, the 6-person Electoral Commission, is made up of 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats. So you can see Musk needn't worry, the law will be after him. Not that he would anyway. In the hours after the first assassination attempt on Trump, Musk responded to an ex-poster who asked why would anyone want to assassinate Donald Trump. Musk wrote, "No one is even trying to assassinate Biden, Kamala." Now in Pennsylvania on Sunday at a place called Latrobe, who would have thought? Trump called Kamala Harris, and excuse the language, a shit vice president, the worst. You've got the worst vice president. Kamala, you're fired. Get the hell out of here. You're fired. Get out of here. Get the hell out of here, Kamala. As Trump's speech became weirder, and this is telling, as Trump's speech became weirder, Fox News cut away the live coverage to show Harris being cheered at a PAC rally in Georgia. On Saturday night, Trump, to encourage people to vote, said, "Jill, get your fat husband off the couch, get that fat pig off the couch, tell him to go and vote for Trump, he's going to save our country. Get the guy the hell off out, get him up, Jill, slap him around, get him up, Jill, we want him off the couch to get out and vote." This is the man who wants to be the president. Trump went to a McDonald's store in Feasterville, Trevose, in Philadelphia's northeastern suburbs to mark Kamala's 60th birthday on Monday. The purpose was for Trump to continue his lie about Harris by casting doubt that she worked in a McDonald's when she was at college. You might think whether or not Kamala Harris worked at McDonald's is a petty point to make when there are bigger problems to talk about, such as the kind of government the United States might have. But it is part of Trump's strategy. It's a deliberate strategy, and we'll talk a bit more about that next week. So now, before we go over to you, the Trump campaign yesterday claimed the British Labour Party is interfering in the election. It's another chapter from the fascist campaign book. Accuse the other side of which you have been accused. It's all part of the deliberate noise creation and obfuscation that underpins Trump's communication strategy. It's a deliberate thing. Okay, so any questions, queries or comments? We've got 2 microphones, and I just need 2 people to volunteer to do this. So thanks for volunteering, Kathy. And Danny is going to volunteer as well. 2 wonderful women. So I just want to ask you, when you get the microphone, please wait until you get the microphone before you ask the question, because we want everyone to hear your question. Yes, Adele, you're first. But wait till you get the microphone and hold it near your mouth. If you don't hold it near your mouth, we all won't hear the question. So we want to hear the question or the comment. So Adele, please do share.
And just further to that, you don't need to press anything on the microphone. It's all on.
2 very minor points in this huge debate. I'm starting off little. One was an observation about the camera angle with Kamala's interview on Fox. When it was looking over the shoulder of the interviewer, it made the interviewer very much larger and Kamala rather small. I don't know if anybody else noticed that, but it's it's technique. And the other thing that I also noticed right at the very beginning, and perhaps not huge in your scheme of things, is that 2-year cycle of election in the House of Representatives, does that not mean that they're semi-permanently in election mode and not necessarily concentrating on their job, so to speak?
Yeah, the answer to that's yes. They are more or less in continuous election mode. And there's an election every even-numbered year. So in 2026, there'll be Senate seats up for grabs, governorships, etc., etc. So, yes, you're right. But senators are elected for 6 years. And senators are on a rotational basis, like in the same way ours are. The Senate's never emptied at the same time. Right.
Neil, I've got
Oh, yes. Oh, good.
Just back to definitions. Cabinet in Congress. In what you're talking about, cabinet, as we understand it in Australia, is obviously very different from the cabinet and like who is on cabinet and what the role of cabinet is. Can you just expand a little bit on?
Yeah, well, look, as you know, in Australia, we've got in inverted commas the Westminster system. I say inverted commas because it's not, it's been bastardised a fair bit as it's gone on to suit politicians. But the theory behind it is that the Parliament is responsible to the people, and the executive is responsible to the Parliament. Right? So that's why ministers have to come from the Parliament, because they are responsible to the Parliament. In the United States, cabinet ministers are not responsible to the legislature. They're just responsible to the president and serve at the behest of the president. So the president then can draw from wherever, in theory, the best talent. But you can bet your bottom dollar that Elon Musk will be in a Trump cabinet. He has to be after donating all that money. So there's a quid pro quo thing goes on. Liz Cheney, Harris would have to reward Liz Cheney. So that's basically how it works. It's to do with responsibility and accountability, and they've just got a different, a different system that has advantages and disadvantages.
What about Zuckerberg? He single-handedly won Biden in the last election.
Well, you see, he's another person like Elon Musk who are deeply troubling because they have so much power. So, their budget would be probably twice or three times what Tasmania's budget is. But no, they are not accountable. They're not accountable to anyone. And they're both dangerous. They're very dangerous. I mean, Zuckerberg goes to Senate hearings and things and says, oh, yes, we've been bad and we're going to change and we're going to fix it. Nothing changes. Nothing happens. Just as a matter of interest, I've got a real bugbear at the moment with Facebook. Well, I've always detested Facebook, but the Tasmanian Constitution Society is on Facebook, or it was, but I can't access the account. So you can get cut off. I don't know what we've done or what we've said to upset Facebook. We haven't posted anything for months, but anyway. But they can just cut you off. They can just cut you off. So you can imagine an authoritarian regime. I mean, this might sound a bit far-fetched, but an authoritarian regime with people in it, like Elon Musk, who've got that power over communication, is extraordinary. And it's deeply troubling. Are you going to wave the microphone around, or are you going to ask a question?
I assume that Americans have independents representatives. Is that correct?
Have what representatives?
Independents.
Yeah. They do, not many.
If independents are elected, what effect does that have on the college vote system?
Well, an independent's never been elected president. So it doesn't... so the Electoral College has to vote for however a state voted, and a state hasn't voted for an independent. But what we might talk about next week is I think independents are wreckers in presidential elections. And an independent, Ralph Nader, cost Al Gore the presidency. If he hadn't run, Al Gore would have won. Jill Stearns, the Green candidate, has refused to drop out. Her family tried to persuade her, her friends tried to persuade her. She's steadfast. Trump loves her. She will take votes from Harris. And she'll never get in. She's got no hope of getting in. And I've just quickly, before we go to Jane, Ross Perot in 1992, Ross Perot, a multi-billionaire, gave Clinton a scare because people thought that he might take votes for Clinton, from Clinton. But as it worked out, as it transpired, he didn't. But yeah, I hope that answers your question, does it? You've got a little lecture to boot. Yes, Jane. Oh, sorry. Yes.
You haven't mentioned the Secretary of State. Could you talk about that a bit? Because the Secretary of State seems to be a bit of a free-ranging person who speaks for America in all sorts of situations.
Yes, well, it's a very important position, more so because the United States is the most powerful country in the Western world. And I think the importance of the position is indicated by some of the office holders. You know, Hillary Clinton was one. John Kerry was another. So, yeah, I think the President puts a lot of thought into who's going to be doing that for the reason that you say. They represent the country throughout the world. They chair negotiations. They go on diplomatic missions. It's a very important job. I don't know that a president in their right mind would reward a donor with that role who wasn't, capable. or qualified. Yes, Jane?
Neil, I just wanted to hark back to the Electoral College, and I apologise, I listened to a talk last week, so if it's redundant, please ignore the question. The first thing I'd like to do is just make a suggestion that the Electoral College really is probably one of the threats to American democracy. But the other thing was a question about how these, how people are appointed to the Electoral College. In the notes, it was an indication that it was actually a partisan appointment. So where does that sit when they are going to confirm the election? In January.
Yeah, well, what happens is that the parties elect, or so it varies from state to state, and the parties basically select them. Sometimes, usually they're elected. They're elected by an administrative committee of the party or a party conference or convention, and they're usually former politicians, ex-governors, ex-members of Congress, that kind of thing, people who have strong party ties. And then they pledge to vote for the candidate that their state votes for.
Do you think that Robert Kennedy will have a negative effect on the Democrat vote?
Look, I don't think that he will. He's not running now. But I think his name will be on some ballot papers. I think that his agenda is to be the Secretary of State for Health, and God help us, and God help America if that happens, because he's mad, and well, he is. He said there was been a worm in his head, and he's a conspiracy theorist. The pandemic didn't happen; it's all a conspiracy. It's his father and uncle would be rolling in their graves. So I don't think that he would have any major impact.
A dull retro question. That Nixon wasn't impeached, so how did they deal with him?
Well, the times were different then, and Nixon's I don't quite know what to make of him. Look. Lots of negatives about Nixon, and you can't get past Watergate. But in those days, the world was a bit different, and the Republicans, to their credit, were responsible and went to see him and said, "Well, Mr. President, if you don't resign, we'll impeach. So if you want to be impeached, don't resign." So he didn't want to go, but they basically forced him into it. Had the situation been reversed and Trump was, well, you can imagine there'd be no, there'd be no rational way around it, and so that's why he resigned.
I'm wondering about where the fourth estate might sit in this kind of analysis of the checks and balances, that were originally penned by the founders. And so the fourth estate in its changing role. So, surely it participates in this kind of checks and balances function. And generally, we heard a lot about this with the UK election. Generally, it seemed to have a conservative perspective. So, you've shown us clips of, from Fox, and we obviously know that's very right-leaning. And then the social media has completely changed the landscape of the fourth estate. I'm talking about mediation and the role of the media. And so this is just a comment, really. I'm not, but I'm just wondering what you might say about the role of the fourth estate in the current US campaign. And aside from sort of Fox, like the overall landscape, and how
that might be skewing, the polls or skewing the perceptions of potential voters. And then just as a sign-off, like it's just completely scary to think that we might have a social media, guru like Musk sitting in a cabinet. I mean, that's completely changing, or inflating the role of the fourth estate if that were to happen. So.
Well, thanks very much for the comment and question, Ms. Bowler. I think that you raise a good point, and I think that the world is a different place now. So the fourth estate's role, I don't think the traditional fourth estate's role was nearly as powerful as it was. There are people who the first thing they do when they wake up is look at this, and they get their news from this, and the news that they get is the news that the social media, whatever, the Facebook, Twitter, X or whatever it is, it's the news that medium thinks you want. So really, I think there are echo chambers. So to answer your question, I think in days gone by, and that 60 Minutes interview that we talked about, that tradition of the presidential candidate going on 60 Minutes, millions of people would watch that. And families would sit around the television together and watch it and talk about it. But now those set pieces don't have the importance that they once used to have. And if 60 Minutes is on CBS, well, that's Harris, so I won't watch that because I'm a Trump supporter. Fox News is the same in that it has a very loyal audience, but what Fox is producing is what that audience wants to hear. We had that situation after the last election where Fox continued to propagate Trump's lie that he won the election when they knew that he hadn't, and they knew they were sued by that ballot box company and had to pay nearly $1 billion. So I think that, just getting back to the point that you're making, I think that social media has become a lot more powerful, a lot more influential, and I'd say a lot of people, I don't know what the research is on this, but a lot of people, for them, that would be their sole source of news. And it's an echo chamber. I mean, I'm in one myself. I can't, I can't subject myself to that. You'd like to ask another supplementary question? I think we can. Oh, yeah.
So it seems then that we've got a change of, or a change to definition. So when we used to talk about fourth estate, it was about what we now call the legacy media, like the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune and the major networks or whatever. So now you're saying that role's diminished or maybe defunct. I don't know, diminished.
Look,
and that now it's about social media and these echo chambers that social media sort of creates or encourages, right? Because you turn on your phone and you get what you like to read as opposed to. And so maybe fourth estates, maybe we need a new term, or fourth estate is just not there.
Look, with respect, Ms. Bowler, you're sounding a little bit like a journalist, and she used to be, and a very good one too. Look, I wouldn't say that the traditional media is defunct. I don't think we're there yet, but I think we are on that road because social media still picks up things from traditional media. So there's a bit of an exchange going on, and traditional media certainly picks up things from social media. So there's a bit of an exchange going on there. But I don't think we're at a point where we can say traditional media is defunct. But I think we can say that its influence has certainly been mitigated tremendously by social media. And the people in charge of social media are not They're in the business of making money. They're not in the business of providing news as traditional news was. So we had a question up here.
Neil, these talks are so timely and so valuable. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I have a comment and also a question. Rory Stewart, is that man known to people?
Yeah, Rory Stewart, yeah.
He has a very well-known podcast called The Rest is Politics.
Indeed.
He must be in Australia at the moment because he's interviewed.
No.
And of course he was asked a question, who is going to win?
Yeah.
And he said, we really can't take a lot of notice of the polls.
Yeah.
Because for the last few elections they were so wrong.
Yes.
Which is why they're saying it's very, very tight.
Yeah.
And so he's predicting that Kamala will do better than expected, which is quite an encouragement, I feel.
Yeah.
Now, my question was about the secretaries of departments.
Yep.
And I was interested to hear how different the methodology of choosing is, as different from in Australia. Do you think by choosing somebody who is well known and maybe has greater capacity, that broadens their influence, or is it non-democratic, considering the importance the role of some of these people has in the political situation in America?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think it is democratic because that's the system. That's one of the roles of the president to appoint his or her cabinet. So I think that's democratic. I think that we've witnessed just this past week the assembly of a cabinet in this state, and I don't think it's one of the most capable cabinets we've had. And I think that there are people in there whose capability perhaps isn't as great as we would like. So it's democratic because they are members of the parliament and they've been elected and all that. No, there's no question about that. But whether or not they're the best people for the roles is another question. So I think an advantage that the United States has, if you're not rewarding someone, there's an opportunity to get the best people, the best fit for the role. Now we had another question. Yes, sir.
Is it my turn?
Yeah, and then the man in the cap.
Maybe the comment should, unfortunately, Trump win.
Yeah.
What would happen to NATO or his friends Putin, Ukraine, etc.? Would you like to comment on that?
If Trump wins, yeah. Well, if Trump wins, God help us. Well, look, I think the Ukraine war, the United States would stop providing weapons and other defence material to Ukraine. Israel would be given a freer rein that it's got now, and it's just heartbreaking and out of control now. So that would continue. He would impose tariffs on the US economy, which would be economically damaging. All the economists say that. Immigration, so-called illegals will be rounded up in similar way that the Nazis did. You find out where people live, you go and you send armed guards to their door to bash their doors down and drag them out of the country. They'd just be a couple of consequences. There would be the chaos that we saw from 2016, because that's how he operates. And he's got his agenda, the Project 2025 agenda, the big, thick book that's full of what he will implement. So the United States is really in danger of becoming less democratic than it is now. And I think that you could argue that it's not, on a scale of democracy, if very democratic's 10 and not democratic at all is 1, I think the US is probably about 6. The gentleman in the cap, I hope that answers your question. Yes, go ahead, and hold the microphone close to your mouth, Mr. Cap.
Yeah, I think in most elections all around the world, the number one issue for the majority of the electorate is the hip pocket nerve.
the economy. For the Democrats, the American economy at the moment is booming.
Yeah.
The economists, all the financial experts will tell you these are the good times. However, for the people in the Rust Belt, for those people in those key swing states, there are a substantial number of people who've been hurt by globalization and the emergence of the new economy. They're feeling hurt. Obama this week said, I acknowledge people are struggling. You know, the cost of living crisis, housing, they're the issues that impact the average Joe Blow voter. Democracy, the rise of totalitarian states, what's happening in other countries, the average Joe Blow America doesn't give a toss about it. They just want to get ahead in life. When that doesn't happen, they get angry. The Democrats seem to be, this is my question, do you think that the Democrats are being shifted off message in terms of focusing on the economy and the benefits they've brought to the country by Trump's play acting and ridiculous things that he says? The Democrats are reacting to Trump and they're not staying on key message.
Yes, well, the answer is yes. I think that you're quite right. People, for us, our concerns are not their concerns, and their care about democracy in the future. These are all intangible things. They're all intangible. But what's tangible is the food on the table. What's tangible is me losing my job. What's tangible is not being able to look after my family in the way that I would like. Here's someone who says he understands me, he's with me, he's in my corner, he's my champion. So I don't like some of this stuff that he does, sure. But what's the other side saying and doing? So I think that, and I've talked about this in a previous series when I talked about how I think Ronald Reagan created Donald Trump. I think that people don't concern themselves with things that they can't really see and touch and relate to, and doesn't seem to be a danger. And I think the Democrats are playing that a little too hard. I'd get away from that and say the economy is going gangbusters, and this is why, and no other country in the world at the moment, and this is true, is doing as well as the US economy. That's the message they need to be hammering home, and hope, this is going to get better. This is just the beginning. I would turn down the democracy and Trump being a felon. Look, no one cares. That's all a conspiracy theory anyway. That's the establishment's way of getting him. They want to bring him down. So, yeah, I would turn down the dial. I agree with what you said. Yes, Kathy, you were eager to say something.
Yes, can I just ask a quick question?
Yes.
The power of women. Throughout the last number of years, there's been a lot said about trying to motivate the women's vote, particularly around issues of abortion. And I'm just wondering whether there's anything that you've been able to discern through polling or through anything else that suggests that there's a greater motivation happening.
Well, look, I think the polling that I've seen shows that abortion as an issue is about 19% of people are concerned about it. I think that this comes back to voting on an issue in the same way that Trump voters, right, might like all that he's on about, but they think that he's in their corner, so I'll vote for him for that reason. Women, and the Democrats should be doing this, will be saying to women, you want more of this? Vote Trump. We are the ones that will stop this. We are the ones who will protect you. We are the ones on your side. I think that's what they should be doing. I haven't seen enough of the Democrats' campaign material to know whether that's happening, but I suspect in some states it would. I think it definitely would. So getting women motivated about an issue and then getting them to vote are difficult things to do, and that's why they need to do that. I remember my partner's American. I remember after the 2016 election, there were mass protests. He was furious, because where were all those people on voting day? Did they all vote? No good screaming about the horse bolting. No good screaming about it once the horse is gone. You've got to bolt the door before it can get out. So that's, and I think what Kathy's alluding to, I think for some women abortion would be very important, but it depends how widespread that is. Yes, sir.
Just in response to your you don't know what's out there, I've seen several things which are specific to the abortion issue, and one of them is that the Democrats have got a lot of real young women talking about their experiences with having to have abortions.
Oh, great.
And also, I saw this really funny one, this is probably on Instagram just yesterday, where they interviewed young men and they asked them about what a woman does with a tampon. and whether they had, how many they had to use while they had a period, whether they could urinate when they had one in. I mean, and none of the men had any idea. Like one man said, one tampon for a period. Right. All sorts of ridiculous. And then the punchline was, and are you registered to vote? So you're going to vote on women's bodies issues.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. So that's great.
I'll just hand myself over to you.
Now look, we've now. All right. Very quickly, last question because we're on time.
Quick question to follow up on the previous discussion. In terms of in the previous election, what percentage of voters who turn out are women?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm not sure of the answer. Yeah, I don't. I'm not sure of that. But I think that the percentage voting Democrat's higher than Republican. So look, unfortunately, yes, Kathy?
Like commercial, Kaleidoscope next Thursday, Dr. Matt Killingsworth will be speaking on the eve of the election. So don't miss that one. There's some great insights.
Okay, and Kathy mentioned November the 8th and Professor Jenny Hocking, who's going to be here November the 8th, 11:30. Put it in your diary. Do come. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the discussion.